What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 83, 2025 MLB Draft Demo Overview. Today we are talking college outfielders with some bonus catcher content. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard, familiar face and voice from an unfamiliar setting. Where on earth are you? I see bobbleheads. I see mugs. I see
Marty
bad
Bird.
paint jobs in the background.
Marty Bird is somewhere right over there. Yeah, so my wife is working at home. We got a lot of stuff going on this week, right? With the NBA draft. I got to watch that tonight.
Yep.
Went to the Twins game last night, which is usually our backup night to record. So since my wife works from home and our desks sit next to each other, I got chased out of my house. So I came to my office, which I'm vacating here and at the end of the week. And so, yeah, I haven't packed I was going to pack my bobbleheads up, but I didn't because I figured that they would make a nice background. So, yeah, there's some Ant bobbleheads, Ryan Dozier, Joe Mauer, all the good stuff.
There you go. Love it, dude. And, dude, we're 3 weeks out from draft night 1, and we're like slightly less than 3 weeks out from college football 2026.
Yes.
I know you're excited about, which I do want to say, like, maybe in the entire time I've known you, I have never texted with you more than in the opening week of college football 2025 when we were kind of figuring out how to land elite recruits,
yes.
build a dynasty, all of that. Are you excited? Are you participating in the update? What's your game plan for when that comes out? Because I know you're gonna play.
Yeah, so I'll buy it. I think if you do the pre-buy thing,
Mm-hmm.
You get it like 3 days early. So what happens is I have to commandeer the Xbox from my son, move it to the big TV in the basement. But I'm different when it comes to the gaming stuff because you love to play the games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so unless you're playing, and this is just my opinion, and I could be way wrong, you can tell me I'm an idiot, but unless you're like so good at the game that you're playing it on like expert level, right? The actual playing of the game kind of waters down how well you do everything else, right? Because if you're playing it at rookie level and you're just beating everybody 60-0, it doesn't matter how well you recruit because you're just better than the computer at the gameplay, right?
This is true.
And so my test is always like, how well do I recruit? How well do I use the things that are all me against, can I out recruit the computer? Can I get guys to come to the small school? And then I have to simulate the games.
Yep.
To see if I can actually recruit and keep my team together. And so I thought the recruiting thing last year, like I thought there was a lot of glitches in the game. I think you and I talked about a lot of those weird things that happen. But yeah, I will go through and I will spend hours and hours and hours on recruiting classes. And I write so much stuff down. Like I don't write for really anything. And then I have notes. I scribble down notes. But this all goes back to like when I was in high school. My little brother and a buddy of mine and I would go in my basement and we would get like an hour to recruit. And then the other two would go shoot baskets. And then we'd come in and we'd simulate the games to see how good we were. So it was all kind of a competitive deal. So you'll play the games. You'll be great at the games. Like people are like, well, you want to play me? And I'm like, no, because you'll kill me. I don't even know. I don't know the first thing about the actual playing of the games, but I will try to figure out all the shortcuts to get that 5-star to commit to me and keep them committed to me.
So here's my question. This time last year, you were trying to get 5 stars committed to Sam Houston State. If I'm not misremembering, who is your dynasty of choice? Because like me, you're a Wisconsin Badgers fan, although I have some split allegiances because I also went to SMU. But for me, SMU has become less fun of a save because they made the playoff last year. That's kind of boring. They're more legit. The recruiting's better, all of that stuff. So are the Wisconsin Badgers enough of a travesty of a program that they appeal to you as an underdog save now, I guess is my question.
They kind of do. But the one thing I think the mistake that I made last year is I didn't look at what I wanted to recruit and the playbook that I wanted to run. And then
Okay.
and so for me, for football to be fun, like let's have 4 receivers on the field. Let's throw the ball 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to find a team with the right playbook to accompany the type of recruiting that I will do. And Sam Houston State was not that. And so then I had to change things, but it wasn't really how the guys came in. I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time. And the hard part was I had to move them into a different conference to give me a shot to make
Okay.
the CFP, because I could be the 18th ranked team in the nation
Yep.
and not make it. And so I was like, well, I got to move. So I'm probably going to take, whatever the worst of the Power 5 schools is, or Power 5 conferences, and then the worst school in that conference, just to make it difficult. I don't know who that is. I'm going to just have to do a little research and then find a team that's pass heavy and get after it. So I think I ran 20 years
That's
on last year's
wild.
game.
20 years is insane.
And I made it to the CFP one time,
Okay.
but my overall team rating was like a 94.
I'm sure it was.
And so the other thing, now that we've talked for 6 minutes about not baseball, like you would get like coaching points
Mhm.
to use, but then you would cap out at a level. Did you run
Yep.
into this? And so like
I don't think I played long enough I don't think I put my 20 seasons worth of work in to get to like level 99 and not have any more points to spread around.
So
But I just poured all of mine into recruiter upgrades anyway.
And so that was the other thing. I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep accumulating this stuff to upgrade and be a well-rounded guy. And then I was like, wait, I just maxed out. I think it was like level 40 or something.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh, now you continue to get the points, but you can't spend them.
Yep.
So just to if I would have restarted it, there's just things I would have done differently. And now obviously it's been a year. And so I've forgotten everything that I learned. So it's going to start fresh anyway. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And have a kid that I had in class, and actually had him in basketball, just transferred to Illinois. So Illinois is kind of my sneaky.
There's your end.
Sneaky, and if he's in the game, he'll be one of the DNs on the team. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward really to the changes, like the transfer portal. I didn't think
it was an afterthought last year.
Yeah, it didn't reflect at all what is really happening.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So
yep.
I'm sure there's upgrades to that part of the game. I would guess there'll be something like there was just one portal, right? And it was after you recruited. I almost feel like there's got to be another one. And like some of the deal breakers were weird. I mean, I had one year where my championship level competition or whatever dropped from like a B- to a C+, and boom, I had 20 guys in the portal.
Yep.
And I was like, dang, that was weird. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the changes, and yeah, we'll see how many seasons I can get in before I get real busy with my new job.
There we go. Well, now that we have successfully diverted anyone who tuned into this podcast to hear about baseball away from it, let's quickly do some housekeeping. So ways that you can support the show. We are, I just want to give a shout out to folks who have been supporting us. We are doing great numbers here in June as we get close to the draft. So appreciate people checking us out. Ways that you can support us. You can like and subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform. You can find all of our stuff on YouTube. The handle there is @Destination the Show. If you want to reach out to us with questions, the best way to do that is on social media. You can get us on Twitter @DTS_pod1, on Blue Sky @Destination the Show, or via email, the password to which I have now recovered. And the email address there is destinationtheshow@gmail.com. Dude, before we jump into our kind of demos of the day, we got to talk draft night plans real quick, because folks have been asking. So for the second time, the second annual Diamond-centric Destination the Show Draft Night 1 live stream will be happening on night 1 of the draft, which has been expanded a little bit this year. We will be, what did we do last year? I think we did 4.5 hours straight of live streaming. We got about 10,000 eyeballs on that stream, which was amazing. I think absolutely blew our expectations out of the water. and it was so fun. We are going to do the entire thing again for day one of the draft. So are you amped for doing that again?
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think there's like 30 more picks this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we had bounced on and off, you and I,
Yeah.
just because we were trying to do some writing. At one point, I was trying to do some eating. I don't know if I actually achieved that. I think I ate some spaghetti like at 11 o'clock that night to try to get me to the next day. But yeah, I'm excited to do that. It's going to be interesting because there's that many more names.
Yeah, there is.
When you get down really past comp round B, it becomes way more of a crapshoot.
Yep.
Right, where Jonathan Mayo famously will talk about efforting to find information, because there'll be guys that probably go night one, maybe not night one, but potentially night one, that there's just not a lot of information out there on. So it'll be very interesting to see. Plus, how long is it going to take, and what kind of stamina do we have in us to sit in front of a camera?
We're old, dude. I'm putting the over under on time spent on our stream at 5 hours and 59 minutes. And I think if you put a gun to my head, I might take the over on that. And so it's gonna be interesting. There's other factors in the mix here too, right? Like internet bandwidth. Last year, I sent my entire family out of the house, conveniently set up a trip to the movie theater for my wife and kids. And so I got to think of a bigger and better reason to find them something to do so that we don't have small guests on our live stream. But maybe that would add to it. I don't know.
So do we know what time night one starts?
I want to say it's
earlier.
7. Is it earlier? Okay, I don't then.
Yeah,
I don't.
It can't be 7 because
because we'll be there till what a.m.
I want to say it's like 5 or something. Like it's earlier than it was last year, and I want to say I saw that on Twitter or something at some point in time.
We'll get a graphic up. We'll get a graphic put together with all the details. We'll get it up there. We'll get it out there for folks. And I'll add just one more thing in looking ahead and kind of prepping. We've got 3 more episodes before the actual draft. Today, we're going to dig into college outfielders and catchers. We will our last episode before the draft. We're probably going to do a bumper episode of like best team fits for all of the teams that we're interested in cover. We will probably live stream that one to work out the kinks from the previous live stream, if I remember. For an old dude like me who's not tech savvy, you are very tech savvy, but I'm not. But we'll live stream a like best fits that we like for each particular team the week before the draft as we get close here. But dude, let's go ahead and jump in. Now that we spent 15 minutes talking about college football and what we're doing night one, today we're mostly going to focus on college outfielders. We're going to throw a catcher in the mix who we're actually going to start with. And I think the reasons why will become obvious. What we'll do is similar to other weeks where we've overviewed draft demos. We'll dig into several names inside the consensus top 50, which is really starting to get pretty stable now. We're seeing a little bit of shuffling, but not some of the big movements that we see earlier in the cycle. We'll give a little bit of an overview of their numbers for the season, and then we'll dig into a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of pitch to you to get your take on as we think about where the player might be a fit and kind of relevant things that we're thinking about as we approach draft night. So the first guy I wanted to talk about with you, we have talked about catchers a bit, but I wanted to circle back to Ike Irish. So Ike Irish, Auburn catcher, athlete, outfielder extraordinaire, currently ranked 14th by consensus. In a lot of mock drafts that we're seeing coming out now at the end of the cycle, he is going somewhere in the 8 to 12 range, right? So just quickly to recap Irish's numbers, strong and steady improvement throughout 3 years in the SEC. This year, 364, 469, 710. That's good for 1.179 OPS, 152 WRC plus, 19 home runs, 11 stolen bases, walking 13% of the time, striking out 14% of the time. You previously said, Jeremy, or kind of hinted at, because we talked about the specific to the Twins. Take Ike Irish if you believe he's the best hitter available when your pick comes up. How do you feel about his profile specifically as a hitter? If we take the catcher piece out of it, because I think what's been talked through about his profile is super strong arm. The rest of the catching skill set is pretty raw. Sounds like he's open to playing wherever a pro organization wants him to. How do you feel he compares to some of these other college bats that we've gone through? It feels like he's really kind of emerged as one of the more well-rounded profiles. And I guess I'll return to that question. If you're the Twins at 16 and he's on the board, do you think he's potentially one of the best bats they could choose?
The answer to that question, I think, is yes. The college hitter demographic, which the Twins tend to draft from pretty frequently, I think we both agree is not great this year. Ike Irish has certainly helped himself. The part that I don't want the Twins to pigeonhole themselves into is, oh, we need to draft a college catcher, right? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the feeling that I got all along as we talked about this, because Ike Irish at the time was sitting outside of that range where it's like, okay, we're going to reach to take a college catcher, and then we're going to hope that he can hit or hope that he can receive, one or the other. If you draft him at 16 or if you draft him above 16, I don't know that that's where his home is, right? Because I think he could go that high in the merits of his bat. Yep. And so I do think that that's why it's a better fit for the Twins than I did previously. However, he's done enough for himself where as a bat, he might just be off the board prior to that. Mm-hmm. And if he does fall to the Twins, great, pull the trigger, see if you can keep him behind the dish. The Twins have been good at promoting guys quickly, right? So if his receiving skills are even close to where you want them to be, you can't let the glove hold him up if the bat's good enough, right? Yep. So I do think that he makes sense at 16, and I do think that he could be the best hitter available. And if he can play elsewhere, if there's a need for it, I'm not opposed to that. 6'2", 200, not overly huge, could probably play the corner, would have a bat for that in the outfield. Yep. But I would really like to see him try to catch first if he ends up in the Twins organization.
Yep, agree on that. And let me just throw something out there, RE Twins and catchers, because every draft cycle, I for real, dude, like 10 to 15 questions about like who's a good catcher the Twins could take. I'm going to throw a candidate out there for people to satisfy the catcher thirsty Twins prospect crowd. Easton Carmichael is a guy who I like currently, 92nd on the consensus board out of Oklahoma. This is a range I feel comfortable drafting college catchers. 3rd, 4th round type of bat. 3 seasons at Oklahoma, hit 329, 398, 613 this year, 17 home runs, had a big power breakout. Doesn't walk a ton, 9%, although that is slightly better than last year. Struck out 15.7% of the time. Certainly, like, again, a work in progress on the catching piece. But I think if you look back at the Twins' past few drafts, what you've seen with all of their guys are either an athlete who happens to catch or a hitter who sometimes catches. Rarely have they targeted surefire defensive catchers. So it'll be really interesting to see, if they were to go that direction. I think that would be a little bit of a change in direction. Let me ask you one more question about Irish quick before we move on. So just trying to read the tea leaves a little bit, and we get to this time of year, right, where a lot of boards who update monthly have him ranked in the like 8, 9, 10, 11 range. And some of the ones that update less regularly, like Keith Law, Kylie McDaniel, no shade, they just do regular updates. He's still sitting in the 20s. So I think he's going to get pushed up a little bit more into this 10 to 12 range, maybe by consensus when it's all said and done. If you're the Blue Jays and you're drafting at 8, does Ike Irish at 8th overall feel too rich for you on draft night?
I don't think so. If you look at the last couple of drafts where the college guys went off the board, the Mets took his name's escaping me. Someone that was really, really good in college, pretty high.
Carson Bench. Oh, you're talking about catchers or just hitters in general?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, Kyle Teal went to the Red Sox at 14. And I think we felt like that was kind of a drop, right? Shoot, I just had the name and then I forgot again.
Kevin Parada?
Yes, Kevin Parada. So where did he go? How high did he go?
He was 11th overall.
Okay. So, and that felt like, I think he kind of had dropped a little bit. That was the weird year, right? When Horton went high, when Rocker went high, like there was just guys that snuck up. And then Kyle Teal, like that's a range now where we've started to see, when we get to the back half of that, and Kyle Teal's moved up pretty quick. So for the Blue Jays to do that, if they think he can catch, I think that fits. Even if he doesn't catch, just based on how the Blue Jays kind of do things, because they're loaded right now in the ranks. If you can get hitters, I think it makes sense for them at 8. I don't think it's too rich. At the end of the day, I don't know that I'd put him there. But I do think that you could certainly start to see that be his range, just because of how teams in that area have drafted in the past.
Yep. Okay. There's some bonus catcher content. We're gonna move on, talk about the next guy on our list who has been in a very kind of locked in, steady position throughout this entire draft cycle. That is Arizona outfielder Brendan Summerhill. Native of Chicago, Illinois. Just to walk through his numbers, just got done playing at the College World Series. 44 games this year. He did miss a little time due to injury in the middle of the season. I want to say it was a broken bone in his hand. Hit 343, 459, 556, 17.4% walk rate, just an 11.6% strikeout rate. So walking way more than he strikes out. 137 WRC plus. Again, we see that track record of improvement in all 3 of his college years. Here's where the questions come in for me. In his sophomore season, he hit 8 home runs over 58 games. In his junior season, he hit 4 home runs over 44 games. Now, mind you, plenty of extra base hits, including 6 triples. I think it's fair to say that Summerhill is like a high floor profile, right? Because you see someone who is at least going to start their pro career in center field, someone who has a really good approach at the plate, gets on base a ton. How are we feeling about this lack of present power? 4 home runs this year, a 213 ISO, which is down a little bit from his sophomore season. Is that something that concerns you if you're taking a hitter in the top 15, or can you kind of live with that if you can project him to get to 45 power, 50 power when it's all said and done?
I think there's probably guys that would be more concerning about than Summerhill. You mentioned he broke his hand, right? How long does it take to get that back? Because we've seen that with a number of players where it's like you break your hand, the power comes back not as fast. So he missed a month with that, pulled a hamstring.
Yep.
Like how much power do you generate with your bottom half? A lot. So I would tend to think, for someone that's 6'3", 200 pounds, like there's the ability to put on a little bit more muscle, a little bit more just grown man strength. He's 21 years old. And so it doesn't concern me a ton. If he can play at center long term, it would concern me even less.
Yeah.
So I guess to me, that's not something that I'm like, ooh, red flag. It would be one of those, well, I think, there's enough there. Very consistent bat that stayed, that hasn't really disappointed. He hasn't gone up and down like you mentioned. I feel really good about him being drafted just from the perspective of what you're going to get, right?
Yep.
Maybe the ceiling's not as high, but like you mentioned, a higher floor player. And if you're drafted in the middle of the first round, if you're drafting where what just happened to my camera?
If you're now watching this, Jeremy is now bright purple, like he looks like he's on one of those like heat-seeking cameras on like Predator. Wow, that's That's one of the most incredible transitions I've ever seen in 83 episodes of doing this. You just turned
in the middle of a thing. So I'm going to stop my cam here when I'm done talking and then start it again. But I do think that he's a safe pick.
Yep.
And if you can make that pick in the early teens to mid teens, I think it's a good pick for any team.
Okay. While Jeremy figures out his camera situation, let me just talk through a fit that I think makes sense here potentially. And thinking about Summerhill, where he profiles, high floor pick, good approach, good hit tool, solid defensive position. Like you're looking at a premium defensive position, even if he's not an incredible defender. I love the fit of Summerhill to the Red Sox. The reason that makes a lot of sense to me is thinking about another prospect with whom they've successfully layered on a significant amount of power, and that is Christian Campbell, who they signed to a huge extension at the beginning of this season. Summerhill is a similar type of profile to me, someone who, if you can add a half grade or a full grade more of power, you're really in business in terms of potentially having kind of a 2020 type guy who gets on base at a really high clip. So Summerhill to the Red Sox is a fit that I like a ton in the teens. Jeremy is back. You're still purple. I got nothing, man. You look like a different kind of wow. Your computer's just fully freaking out now, huh? Okay.
I was changing the resolution. I figured this was like 64-bit, and I was going for something else.
Incredible.
So maybe it'll switch back. I mean, as quickly as it switched to this.
Hey, you look great. Okay, let's move on and talk about another guy. This has to be one of our more fun disagreements, I think, this cycle. I do want to touch on Jace Laviolette. He's currently 21st by consensus, right? And so I do, as I'm pulling up his numbers, your purple screen, your purple visage has distracted me here, dude. Okay, so Jace Laviolette, 6'6", 230. Here's the numbers from this season. 258. I just can't get over that. 258, 427, 576, walking 21.8% of the time, which is ridiculous. Striking out 25.2% of the time, which is also ridiculous for a first round pick. 18 home runs, down from 29 last year. A 120 WRC plus, down from 146 last year. ISO down from 421 to 318. So we actually got a listener question on this, so I'm going to pitch it to you because I think you and Josiah Waldner are like a hive mind of Jace Laviolette. He says, likelihood of Jace Laviolette being taken by the Twins, and then followed up with his profile kind of intrigues me, not going to lie. Jeremy made a good point. Jeremy made a good point that the Twins have kind of earned the right to take a risk on a player like him. So if Jace Laviolette, Jeremy, is sitting there at 16, what do you think the chances are that the Twins take a big swing on him? No pun intended.
I would put the odds at less than 50.
Okay.
But I don't feel like they would be a lot less than 50, depending again on who else is available, right? If you think back to the Brooks Lee draft, I think we could have put some guys at a very high likelihood that would be drafted if they were available. Collier, right? Cam Collier we would have said 60%, 65% if he's available, but we didn't foresee Brooks Lee being drafted or being available 100%. And so I would say probably less than 50. There's something about him that strikes me as the home run swing. And there's, what'd you say, 25% chance he strikes out?
Mm-hmm.
I can deal with that. But in a similar vein, that Belyeu as a first round pick for me last year wasn't doing it, right? We talked about this, right?
Yep.
Belyeu to the Twins in the first round, we can't, that's too big of a risk. Sure, but you then add Kalen Culpepper, right? You see the development of Brandon Whitaker, who you are constantly reminding everybody of that he's getting better throughout the year.
Constantly.
Right? You can't let us forget these things. And so when you've built some depth, I think it affords you the luxury type of pick. And he would be that, right? And if he turns out to be the guy that people thought he could be when he was projected to be the first overall pick, how big of a deal does that become?
Yep.
Right. And if you can completely miss, you can live with that because of the success that you've had. Now, do I think it would be the greatest pick in the history of the Twins baseball? I don't. But I do think, given the current structure of their system, he is a chance to add someone that you haven't. Here's the other thing too: big power guy, right? Big body, big power. Swing and miss is a real thing. The Twins had Miguel Sano in their system, and it wasn't just the Twins who believed it. He was like the top. He was a top 5 prospect in all of baseball. Okay, the Twins drafted late in the round, the year that Aaron Judge was a draft eligible. The Twins really liked Aaron Judge. Okay. They just felt, and this is a conversation that I had with someone that was pretty high up in the ranks. They felt like Aaron Judge was kind of redundant to what Miguel Sano was, right? Corner guy. And this was, I think, probably around the same time that Sano was getting his opportunity in the outfield. A corner guy, a lot of swing and miss, the huge strike zone. Like, can we afford to have another one of those guys in our system? They decided no. And so this would be a time where it's like there's not this type of player in the system already at all, right? Belyeu might be someone that you could draw some parallels to, but as far as someone that you could probably plug into high A, and if all things line up, have him ready to be a Major League Baseball player in 2.5 years, like this is a real opportunity that you will not get every year. You may get it when you play awful, like the Twins are doing. You might get it next year. But to me, it's a high ceiling, low floor, but really high ceiling pick that you've just afforded yourself the luxury of being able to do if you want.
Okay. There you have it. I have no more rebuttals for you on Jace Laviolette.
You're still anti.
I am still anti, and I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's like, the parallel I draw to Jace, and it's not really a great comparison, but it's Trevor Larnach. Trevor Larnach, left-handed power hitting college outfielder, right? And Larnach had a much better hit tool in college than Laviolette does. And granted, a good amount less power. And it's such a poor process and such a bad trap to fall into, to say left-handed hitting or power hitting outfield that hasn't worked out and just apply that to someone else. I just can't. It's more grounded in like the numbers and the performance from this season, the combination of you're performing worse than you were the previous season. That's one thing. The hit tool questions, the swing and miss questions of hitting 258 in the SEC is pretty unheard of. And then we also are talking about like close to a record strikeout rate if he's drafted in the first round of like 25.7% or whatever it is. And I do agree with you that the Twins have beyond, like, we are seeing a steady churn of guys. Like, literally, someone else we've talked about and texted about a lot, Kalen Culpepper, just hit his first AA home run, just moved up. Very similar timeline to Keishel. The Twins have got the draft and develop thing in the low to mid levels down. I just would rather take that risk on a prep shortstop who's super tooled up than on Jace Laviolette. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. The Twins have had a history of leaning hard into raw power, and there's not more of it in this draft.
There's definitely not.
So I do think, more recently there's been, I mean, they've still leaned into that when possible. I think they've leaned more into like advanced hit tool that maybe we can develop power it, but you gotta take a little, not necessarily a balanced approach.
Yep.
But you can't take all at one, because then it's going to leave you. And I think that taking this kind of affords you the luxury to do what you've been really, really good at
Yep.
and take those advanced hitters, which I know that you like guys in the following rounds that could go there.
Yep.
It's the same thing when you had that draft where you hit on all these college pitchers, then you can go take a shot on Charlie Soto. You can take a shot on Dason Hill.
Yep.
You can take a shot on Dylan Quested, where you couldn't maybe do that when you needed to add more quality depth or higher floors, depending how you want to word that. But I think you understand what I mean, that
Yep.
there's enough good hitters, the Luke Keishels, the Culpeppers potentially, that you can take a shot. DeBarge, like you can take a shot on these other types of players that you maybe haven't had as much success with.
Yeah. And I do think that's what you've hit on there is kind of a misconception that is, I'm going to use a bad analogy to address, right? We tend to think about like, what are X organizations, quote unquote, like type? What is their type of player? And there are, of course, traits which particular organizations like. The Brewers like to draft guys that have good spin traits in their pitchers, for example.
Yep.
But a big part of this is like if you're investing, you want a diverse portfolio of investments, right? If you're trying to manage your money in a safe way that helps it grow. Same thing is true for farm systems.
Yep.
And that's the reason you see someone like Billy Amick, who I think is now a little bit atypical of the type of player the Twins draft, but they took him at 60 because they were like, dang, I mean, this is too good of an opportunity value-wise here to not take him. And that is the type of logic and reasoning I think that you can make a strong case for taking Laviolette. And I will be the first one to hold my hands up and be happy if I am wrong and he is super successful. But let's move on and talk about another guy, dude. This is a tough eval for me, and I think someone we haven't really talked about much this year. So I'm eager to get your takes. 26th on the consensus board, another guy who's held fairly steady is outfielder Ethan Conrad, left-handed hitting, still 20 years old. Right up until right around draft day, actually. His birthday is July 5th. Here's the challenge in the eval here. He played his first 2 years in college at Marist, which is a D2 school, transferred to Wake this year, and was off to an absolutely blazing start until he got a shoulder injury and was out for the entire rest of the season. Like we talked a couple of weeks ago about how there wasn't really that many guys going down with big injuries. Ethan Conrad was the guy from my perspective. He only played 21 games, about 100 plate appearances, hit 372, 495, 744. That's good for a 1.238 OPS, a 167 WRC plus, 7 home runs in 21 games, although this is non-conference play. 18.6% walk rate, 14.4% strikeout rate, super good athlete. So I don't really have a team specific question for you on Conrad other than to say tools wise and production wise, I find him such an intriguing profile because we've spoken a lot about how few well-rounded college hitters there are. How do we weigh this performance in such a tiny sample of 21 games, just about a third of the college season, and the fact that previously he was at a D2 school, no disrespect intended, of course. How do we kind of weigh all that up? Because he's sat in the back half of the first round the entire draft cycle, so there must be at least some level of industry conviction that his tools are going to translate to the next level in some way.
Well, yeah, and I think when you go, you don't just by happenstance go from Marist to Wake Forest, right?
Right.
And so Seaver King was kind of the name that jumps up as a Seaver King was the 10th overall last year,
Yep.
right? And was it D3 that King came from?
2 or 3 for sure.
So I feel like there's something to be said there. He also, Conrad, was really, really good in the Cape Cod League.
Yep.
Which teams, there's certain teams, one of which we watch a lot of, that tends to take guys off of really good wood bat seasons.
Yep.
And so when he has a OPS of 919 in the Cape Cod League, and then comes and does it in a small amount of time for Wake Forest, he's 100% put himself into a conversation to be a first round pick. When we talk about types, right? This is a Twins type guy.
Let me take that a step further real quick, and sorry to cut across you. And you can, I'm going to give this as like a spicy take, and you can tell me if you agree or not.
Okay.
If Ethan Conrad produces at the rate that he did in his first third of the season for the other 2/3 of the season, I think he's probably like a top 10, top 12 pick. And so if you're the Twins and you're picking at 16, and he's overall consensus 26, and you feel good about the shoulder, the health stuff, whatever, I am fully on board with taking him at 16. Fully. Because to me, he's one of, maybe like 5 or 6 college bats that I think is like a really well-rounded overall skill set and tool set. And what I mean by that is the athleticism and the level of skill kind of match. And in this class, what we see a lot of is either really incredible physical tools with some questions, like Wahiva Aloy, or really solid production with not much more of a ceiling, like a guy that we're about to speak more on in a moment in Devin Taylor, who I think is another really interesting prospect. But how do you feel about Ethan Conrad at 16, or is that too rich for you?
No, but I mean, at that point, it becomes what the doctors think, right?
For sure.
Because if it's a season-ending shoulder injury, have the Twins avoided guys with injury? I don't know when Keishel's arm thing showed up, right?
I think it's like that's a known Guardians thing, right? If we go back to like Chase DeLauder was
Right.
someone who was in conversation for the number 1 pick and fell to the late teens because of injury stuff. Now that hasn't necessarily worked out well, just because he's had persistent injuries, but his minor league production's also been excellent. And so I don't know if that's something the Twins have necessarily done. Lord knows they haven't had good luck in general in their farm system. But I don't know.
Pre-lip.
That's true.
Kind of pre-lip. And like Keishel's elbow may have very well been a thing that was pre-existing, that maybe they didn't know about it. But I feel like that's one where he's also had some background of playing first base.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that takes away some of the reason to be super athletic. But I feel like the Rays just took a really super athletic first baseman, Trey Morgan, right?
Yep.
Where you can do things and say, okay, well, let's find someone and put him there. If he's got a shoulder deal and you want to give him an extra year, you're going to hit, but we're not going to have him throw.
There you go.
You can just keep hitting. Keishel, I mean, that's what Luke Keishel did, right? Bring him back from a elbow thing. But that's kind of the whole point, right? Where we don't know how good these college hitters are. There's not a ton of them, but you can find something that you like in all of them.
Yep.
And the Twins, again, seem to lean to that demographic. And so I think there's the potential that Conrad is at least in consideration at 16. I also think that the shoulder thing could push him down, and it could be a consideration of a team that maybe has multiple picks, or can float some extra money towards him if he falls into the 30s. So certainly not someone that I would be like, oh, that's a bummer they took him. I think there's real upside that could work out.
Or hear me out. How about the Brewers take Conrad with their first pick at like 21 or whatever it is, do their usual, save a few $100,000 and start saving up for their usual prep bombshells in round 2 or 3 or 4.
That would be a fun approach if you're a Brewers fan. And they did kind of deviate a little from the norm with their first pick last year. I feel like if that's what they're going to do, you might be taking someone a little bit further down the board.
Sure. That's fair. Okay, let's move on and talk about our next guy. We are talking about Devin Taylor next. Devin Taylor, currently 29th by consensus. He is a left-handed hitting outfielder out of the University of Indiana, 6 foot, 190 pounds, so fairly maxed out frame. But let me just wow you with some of Devin Taylor's numbers season by season, because he's been a starter all 3 seasons. He's played at least 55 games in 3 seasons in the Big Ten. Strikeout rate. Freshman season, 18.9%. Sophomore season, 13.3%. Junior season, 11.2%. Batting average. Freshman season, 315. Sophomore season, 357. Junior season, 374. Slugging percentage. Freshman season, 650. Sophomore season, 660. Junior season, 706. I'll just do one more so I don't get boring. WRC plus. Freshman season, 143. Sophomore season, 150. Junior season, 169. Hit 18 home runs this year, walked 19.3% of the time, 11% strikeout rate. I mean, we're just talking about a guy who admittedly plays in a little bit weaker of a conference, but he's improved by 15% each year. You're talking about a corner profile. It's definitely, it's likely a left field profile. He's really been in this range in the low 30s, late 20s the entire cycle. I guess, why isn't he? My questions for you are 2 things. 1, why isn't he getting more love given that track record of performance and what we've acknowledged about the lack of good college hitters? And then 2, if you're like a Brewers, Twins, Red Sox in Comp A, surely if someone like him is available at like 32, 35, 36, whatever those picks are, you have to be running the card to the commissioner. What are your thoughts on Taylor, his spot on the board, and where he might be a fit?
Yeah, I mean, if Conrad's 26, and I think as a prospect, you gotta think more people would prefer his profile than Taylor's. Taylor doesn't seem out of place. Like you mentioned, Big Ten is not great baseball.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be the highest ranked Big Ten player, right?
Yes, he says,
So,
not at all confidently. I think so.
so, and defensively, I mean, what is he? He's not a great runner.
Left fielder.
Left field. So you're one step away from being on the lowest spot on the defensive spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where a team like the Brewers makes sense, right? They draft a lot of third base type guys. Taylor probably wasn't too far off of that. He's just in the outfield right now, but not really the type that can end up at first base, right? So his value is gonna rest in the bat, and I think you can have questions for guys like that, even though he's made improvement. What's his ceiling? And coming out of that league, I think there are just questions. And in this day and age, if you're at Indiana for 3 years, even though you're making improvement, like, teams are going to poach you if they want you in the SEC or the Big 12. And not to say that there wasn't teams that may have tried to do this. I just think there's enough to say, yeah, that makes sense that he's a late first round grade.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
Not a high first round grade. I do think that he would make sense in Comp A. I do think that the Brewers, if given the choice, would take a 3,500 RPM pitcher over Devin Taylor. But I do think he fits that profile.
Yep. One of the more well-rounded college bets for sure. Okay, 3 more guys. No, I lied. That's like 5. Next guy we're going to talk about. Okay, we'll move quickly through a couple of these because I think there's less. We're getting down the board, and so I think we can link these guys a little bit less explicitly to teams than some of the guys that we've talked through so far. A 34 interesting profile here. Cannarella, preseason, a top 10 profile for sure. 6 foot, 175 pound left-handed hitting center fielder. The headlines here on the profile are elite speed and defense. But you're also, I think, talking about 2 below average tools. You're talking about well below average power, and a below average arm strength in center field. This year he hit 353, 479, 530, a 134 WRC plus, good approach to the plate, 17.8% walk rate, struck out just 14% of the time, but 5 home runs this year, 11 last year, 7 the year before. It's a little bit of a lack of impact, also playing through some persistent shoulder stuff for portions of the last 2 seasons. So I guess my question for you, and maybe this is moot now, Jeremy, because he's, technically outside of the first round by consensus now, but how do we make sense of a profile with 2 below average tools? And can you take a profile with 2 below average tools in the first round? That's something I've spent a decent amount of time thinking about and wondering about, what's kind of like the cutoff in terms of, if the arm's going to be below average and the power is going to be below average, am I really spending a pick in the teens on this type of profile, no matter how good the speed and defense is?
Teens, no. 20s, probably not. 30s, absolutely. Because you're going to get an elite center fielder.
Yep.
And with the speed that, at least for the 6 years of control that you'll get him, will be able to just play a little shallower and be in, you plug him in the 9 spot and turns your lineup over.
Yep.
Will he develop power? Probably not. Will the arm get better? No. Even if you could play, I think of like Willie Castro. Willie Castro's not going to hit 30 home runs. Willie Castro's probably not going to hit 20 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
Willie Castro's good enough to play left field in a big left field, right?
Yep.
So does he make sense to play in center field in Boston? Sure. Does he make sense to play in left field in Boston? Not so much. But I do think that if you can get people around you with the types of skills that maybe build up your weaknesses, he would be just fine. I would have no issues taking Cannarella in the second round, because I do think look at Enrique Bradfield. Dude wasn't hitting for power, right? 80 grade speed, which is a little different than what we're talking about here.
Yep.
But the speed is going to be elite. The defense is going to be elite. I'm pretty sure he hurt his shoulder making a spectacular catch, right?
Yes, correct.
That's just what he does. So he's going to save you runs. He's going to create runs on the base paths. He's just not going to create runs by hitting the ball over the fence.
Yep.
But scoring from first to home, scoring from second to home on a single that wouldn't score most people. There's going to be other ways that he impacts the game, and he does have bat to ball skills. So
he does.
I think there's value there for sure for somebody, and he'll be a Major League Baseball player.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Okay, let's move on to the next guy. We've got a couple more to dig in on. This is an interesting one, number 38 overall. It's Oregon outfielder Mason Neville. So some quick background on him, because we haven't talked much about him. 6'3", 200 pounds, throws and hits left-handed, 21 years old, spent his freshman season at Arkansas before transferring to Oregon. One of the better breakout stories in college baseball this season. And I want you guys, while I'm reading through his numbers, to compare him to Jace Laviolette. So here's Mason Neville's numbers from this year: 290, 429, 724, a 147 WRC plus. Led college baseball with 26 home runs, 18.9% walk rate, a 23.6% strikeout rate. And all of that is massively improved from last year. He increased his walk rate by close to 5%. He cut his strikeout rate by 10%, went from 16 home runs to 26 home runs, and plays a solid center field. So Neville is 38, putting up mostly better production than Jace Laviolette, albeit in a much lesser conference in the Big Ten. What do you make of his profile? How scary is the strikeout rate? I guess if you like Jace, then not that scary at all, seeing as he took 10% off it. But where do you think this kind of profile fits?
Yeah, I don't think. I think you're pigeonholing me when you're telling me that swing and miss doesn't. I'm not a guy. I like walks over strikeouts, right? I just have said I think the Twins are in a position that they can afford to take a profile that's not something that they normally take. Mason Neville in the second round or later would make plenty of sense because you need to have guys like this, right? There's swing and miss, but there's power. You have guys in that like that in every lineup,
Yep.
and so is the K rate scary? I mean, no, you know what you're getting. The in zone swing and miss is the part that scares teams, right?
Yep.
I don't. You maybe have that number in front of you.
I don't.
But that's the part with like Honeycutt last year, right? Honeycutt in zone swing and miss rate super high. That's the part that worries you because it's like, man, if you're swinging through strikes, are you ever going to get better? But if you're just swinging and missing because you're selling out for power, that's just what's going to happen. So I'm not super concerned because you're getting that. I'd be super concerned if you're buying a guy that has a low strikeout rate and all of a sudden you can't hit anything.
Yep.
I'm not concerned.
Speaking of Vance Honeycutt, have you seen his numbers at high A?
I haven't looked. Should I?
All right, check this out real quick. Just before we move on. 60 games at high A this year. 185, 304, 284. 2 home runs, 13% walk rate, 40% K rate, and a WRC plus of 80. Not looking good. And so that, it's not the same as Jace or whatever, but that's why I'm always a little bit leery of swing and miss concern guys with the first pick. I think where the Jays took him was later in not the Jays, pardon me, where the Orioles took him was later in the first round, and that's
20th.
fine. 20th. Okay.
But I think we both felt like that was kind of early, and we knew that one of the things that you were getting with him was it was defense first, right?
Yep.
Defense, power, ton of swing and miss.
Yep.
So, yeah, kind of saw that one coming.
Okay, 3 more guys we'll touch on quickly. Next up at 44th overall is Charles Davalan. He just got done playing in the College World Series and ended his season in very unfortunate circumstances with a misplay that sent LSU to the championship series. Jeremy, tell me what organization this profile reminds you of. 5'9", 190 pounds. Hit 346, 433, 561 with an 11% walk rate and an 8.5% K rate. Charles Davalan will be a future
Cleveland Guardian.
Yeah, there you go. Cleveland Guardian.
You can really pigeonhole some of those guys, huh?
You really can. Although I will say, in his defense, had a little bit of a power breakout this year, up to 14 home runs, 12 doubles, 2 triples. Just one of the better hit tools in college baseball. We'll move on from him. We'll touch on 2 more guys who I'm going to bucket together. And the reason we're going to put them together is because of the back end of the 50 and because they have very similar question marks for me. Number 48 is Max Belyeu, outfielder from the University of Texas who missed time. Both of these guys missed time with injury. And then number 49 is Ethan Conrad out of University of South Carolina. We'll touch on Belyeu's numbers real quick. He played only 32 games this year, hit 303, 410, 576, a 117 WRC plus. Pretty limited sample, although definitely some regression from his 2024 numbers. Had 9 home runs, 13.5% walk rate, but 25% strikeout rate. Both of these guys have, pretty legit hit tool concerns with both. So I guess my wondering is, and both of these guys have been really up and down. Like Belyeu was top 20 type of profile before he got hurt. Petry has been 30 to 45 most of the season. Is the ceiling for a guy like this where you have major hit tool concerns and he's a college hitter kind of comp A, like starting around pick 30 through like 50? Is that roughly where you see a profile like this?
Yeah, I think that's where it makes sense, where you kind of know the limitations, and there are certainly limitations with both of them. I do think the injuries make it the range of outcomes a little bit wider. But yeah, I think that's a fair place for both of them.
Okay. So we'll push pause there. Yeah, I think just overall trends that we see from this crop of college outfielders is we certainly don't see some of the high profile guys that we have in previous season, for that first profile being Irish at 14, Summerhill at 15, with Irish hopefully catching long term. Then you're seeing a lot of guys in the 20s and 30s. So certainly a weaker crop this year, and a lot of questions about hit tools and or returns from injury. So it'll be interesting to track where these guys go. Jeremy, one question. We got a great question that I'm going to try and pitch to you about the Twins and their international signees in terms of just like a general trend. So this is from Isaac on Twitter. He said, any thoughts on the Twins' lack of legit prospect talent being developed over the last few years out of the international market? Emmanuel Rodriguez is obviously a big one, and Baseball America likes the Twins' current DSL group, but the overall production feels very underwhelming. Am I off base, or is that a real concern? Oh, that was a great question.
So it is a great question. I think the hard part here is that 10 years ago, there was maybe 15 years ago, there was very little attention paid to international crops of prospects, right? You didn't know them, you didn't know anything of them until they were making their debut in America. And so it was hard to be super disappointed because you just didn't know when those guys were not good. And you can go back to, what was his name? Maurice Minier, like,
Yep.
Twins spent $3.5 million on him, and he fizzled out.
Yep.
But for every guy like that, you have the Luis Ariz, who you give 10 or 20 grand to, that is really good. So I don't think anybody's off base if they were like, man, it just feels like they haven't done a great job developing international talent. If you figure they're going to add 30 to 35 guys typically in an international signing period, right? Maybe a little less now, but even if you say 25, and then you look at the draft where you're going to add 20 guys.
Yep.
Most of the international guys are not pitchers, right? You don't sign a lot of international pitchers.
Right.
You sign hitters. And so if you have even 20 hitters in an international period, and you draft mostly pitchers, and you sign, it's half and half. So you get 10 hitters a year that comes through the draft, and 20 hitters a year that come through the international pool. If you get one out of those 10 hitters to make it to the major leagues, that's probably a pretty good deal. And you're taking these guys at 21 years old or 18 years old.
Yep.
The hitters that you're signing are 16 years old. And so the range of outcomes doesn't make it to the States ever, which is what happens to 70% of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 6 of them that make it to low A, half of them aren't going to ever see double A. So just the amount, but we just give so much more attention to it now because Baseball America does such a good job covering it.
Yep.
Now we have the top, whatever prospects on MLB.com. So because there's more information out there, we know. And then you have the guys that blow up when they're super young, right? And we can name those guys in the last handful of years: the Jackson Churios, the Ethan Salas, who's now kind of hit a wall.
Yep.
The Juan Sotos, like the Ronald Acuñas, like when they do it, they're elite. But for every one of those, there's 100 guys that never even hit 200 in the complex league.
Yep.
And so, to me, it's not super alarming. And I've long been a proponent of, I don't want to get one guy for $3 million. Let's go find 30 guys and give them 100,000.
Yep.
And I feel like there's a better chance you're going to hit on one of them. But again, these kids are 16 years old when they sign.
Yep.
14-year-olds when they're being recruited. Like, who would have luck in the NFL if they were going and scouting 8th graders? Like, that's insane.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great response. A couple of things I would add on to that. I do think it's fair to say it's been disappointing in recent seasons. A couple of things that are contextual that I would add and throw in there are teams are using models similar to their draft model to identify and prioritize guys from the Dominican, Venezuela, etc., to work to signing. The Twins recently in the past couple of years have had turnover in their international department, right? They have a guy named Roman Barinas who used to be with the Dodgers, and Kevin Goldstein, who folks will remember from Fangraphs and other places, who kind of managed that process in conjunction with Ezra Wise, who kind of built and worked to build the draft model, did the same thing for the international side, former guest of the show. And I do think the production has been poor. However, the vast majority of guys who have been taken in the last couple of years will have had agreements with the Twins from before that change in the regime. And so for us to get to grips with what the new guys have done in any direction or alteration or improvement in their outcomes, we're actually going to have to wait another couple of years, which I realize is kind of frustrating, but that's just the reality of it. And then the last thing I would say is, you bring up a great point about using drafting guys in the amateur draft here as an analogy. Now imagine the inputs into your draft model are from 14-year-old hitters or 13-year-old pitchers. How on earth can you project that? And at the same time, we can say there are teams like the Milwaukee Brewers who clearly have figured out something about the international market based on the number of hits they've had in recent seasons. And so I do think it's fair to kind of expect more. I would also say that we have to give this kind of newer regime a little bit longer to see how they do and if they can get a few more guys to click. But if Emmanuel Rodriguez hits and becomes a productive major league hitter for the next 5 to 7 years, I think the perception of that will change a lot because you really only need one to make things feel like a success.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, dude, let's call it a day there because you are getting purpler by the second. We only have 2 more episodes before our night 1 draft live stream. More details of that to come. Next week, we'll be digging into everybody's favorite draft demo. That is prep, shortstops, absolutely loaded in the range the Twins are picking. So I think that one's going to be particularly interesting. If you have questions, send them our way. We'll finish out with another episode on best fits for teams that we talk about the most. Thank you guys so much for checking out the show. We'll look forward to catching up with you guys next week. See you guys then.